Assalamu alaikum, everyone. This is your host, Kelly from Rising Comer Podcast, and I'm so excited to have you here today. We have a special guest. Alhamdulillah, we have my dear friend Ayishah from AJS Therapy. Some of you may have already heard her on the pod already, but she is the revert Muslim that is dedicated to helping us Muslims discover our wings in this new life that we've chosen to step into. She's a specialized and expert in psychology, but right now she's been really focusing in Islamic Psychology of Healing. So, alhamdulillah, we have you here, Ayishah. How are you feeling?
Oh, I'm feeling so excited to be here. I love being here. Thank you for continuously inviting me here. Thank you to all the listeners for finding a value in our Sadaqah Jariyah. And I can't wait to get into the subject of today's podcast. Quite
Yeah.
excited, actually.
Yeah, I'm excited as well because there's definitely a lot that we can uncover. So this episode is all about religious shaming, and there's so much more that we uncover in this podcast. So be sure to follow on TikTok and Instagram at Rising Cover to get all the updates and to also see when Ayisha dabbles into the podcast as well, because we love having her here. I love having you here. Okay, so religious shaming. This is definitely something that I've experienced. And one of the stories that I wanted to share with you and get your expert insight on this and hopefully some recommendation um, that can help other listeners who are maybe experienced what I've experienced was I remember converting to Islam and then joining a group of girls with who are also reverts and some who would I guess were born Muslim and then came back into the religion and so they were very familiar, and it was quite a surprise to me when I started learning to read the Quran. And then I started going to the masjid, and it was again like another halakha group with some of these girls that I've joined the group with. And I remember one person said to me, like, you're not even reading it right, or you're not saying the Quran words correctly. So you should maybe go and learn the language first before you read the Quran. And this story actually, I totally forgot this happened to me until a few days ago when I went to go hang out with a friend and she was just telling me how she was learning the Quran. And I was like, when I first went into it, I honestly felt so ashamed. I felt like I just almost wasn't worthy of even touching the Quran. Like, who am I as a this Muslim to even dabble into this because of the experience I got? And so I totally forgot about this. But yeah, that was something that I went through. And I didn't go to the masjid anymore because I thought someone was going to be judging me. I felt judged. I thought that I wasn't good enough to even, I guess, even advance my knowledge and even touch the Quran because of the way people would look at me. And we would take turns in this meeting to read a verse from the Quran. And because I wasn't saying it right in the transliteration, she was just basically like, go learn the language. And that really sucked. It really hurt. I got over it eventually, but it did take some time. What would you say of a situation like this? What is your take when we think about religious shaming? Is that a form of religious shaming? Or does it sound or look different? What are your thoughts?
Oh gosh, I'm sorry that you went through it, but I'm almost pretty sure that majority of our listeners, me included, as a young startup Muslims, we experience that. Unfortunately, that hasn't really changed in community. It is not challenged in community. I'm talking about Muslim community. And it's really difficult to depersonalize those experiences and say, no, I choose Allah for new Muslims for so many reasons, but we do overcome it. So although religious shaming is something that we are exposed to, it sort of has a potential to refine our spirit, build our spiritual resilience, and choose Allah over and over again. However, we also are in the process as Muslims of the um, not only desensitizing ourselves to those situations, but also losing that that fluff, that sparkle, resigning from the X factor approach to Muslim community. We stop idolizing Muslims because, as a new Muslim, you're coming into this community and you need love, you need support. That is a particle of your journey, of your religious journey. You can't escape but having that need to be welcomed, to be nourished by your new community. And our community doesn't really cater for it well. There are some groups who do it. Again, groups who are organized. Mostly there are by reverts to reverts groups who do it very well, who understand those needs. But again, this is us learning through resilience and this demystification, re-idealization process of our community, taking things in our hands and providing those services. But what I want for all reverts, all converts to hear is that religious shaming is going to be part of your journey. And it's not your fault, but your job is to depersonalize it. Because in the worst case scenario, just like Kelly mentioned, we're going to stop going to this mosque or to the mosque altogether, or we're going to start avoiding Muslims, or we're going to stop wearing this hijab. Are we going to, like in my example, I've been told, look at you, you are Muslim for so many years, and look at this young girl, she's wearing niqab, she's wearing abaya, and she's basically being better than you. What do you got to say about yourself? So obviously, I haven't come back to this mosque when I felt judged. But I was lucky enough not to leave Islam altogether. But I know many Muslim sisters who did. So unfortunately, I think unfortunately there's no better way to approach religious shaming as an invitation to redefining your faith and treat it as something natural. Unfortunately, like toxic natural, right, in our community. And if you look into definition, it is experiencing criticism and humiliation from others, the authority figures perceived as the religious authorities, people of knowledge, people of having and knowing how to newcomers into this community. And it can occur in a private setting, but it also can occur in a gathering settings, like it had been my experience. And it is really around, it is really shaming, it is blaming, it is criticizing you for not adhering to perceived religious standards, beliefs, or practice. So this is their opinion, they calling on name of Allah, and they making you feel less worthy, uh, creating a new slippery slope of feelings of alienation, unworthiness, guilty, and that has always a spiritual and mental health implications on your well-being. So not only when you experience that, not only should you know that it's normal, that's my advice, but also you should be very careful, even ask yourself, check with yourself, how is it impacting me? Very important step, when you're experiencing that. How is it impacting me? How did it impact you?
Yeah, totally. And when I think about one of the things that you mentioned, which is how this is just almost something that we need to face, like that's the reality of life. Like it's not going to be what I always like to say, peaches and rainbows. When we think about the revert group, right? Because you talk about like, sometimes we tend to experience this within the actual community because I went to the masjid, and it sounds like when you went to the masjid, that's you're opening yourself up to a further and wider group of Muslims. You're actually telling yourself, like, I am walking into now the Muslim community, apart from the Muslim revert convert community. So things within the Muslim community don't always pan out. And like you said, they don't always know how to cater to us Muslim reverts converts. So a question for you is like, for those born Muslims or those who are really involved in the Muslim community and are unaware of maybe the impact of the things that they say and potentially heinous comments that can come across so hurtful and have honestly some serious effect on others, what would you say are two psychological and two spiritual impacts that religious shaming can have on new Muslim or converts and reverts? Or maybe they're not new. Maybe we're like even today, honestly, if I probably heard something, I it probably still affects me to some extent. I couldn't sit here and be like, oh, it doesn't, because I get comments all the time still about how I dress. Um, and sometimes it bothers me and some days it doesn't, right? Because like we're human, it changes. So, what would you say are two psychological and two spiritual impacts that religious shaming can have on us?
Okay, so that is a really, really good question. So it will definitely hit us hard at the level of our self-image, and it might possibly start questioning our not only worthiness in relationship with Allah and belonging to His Ummah, but also at the level of um, uh, the how do I put it? The authenticity and worthiness of this journey at all. So living in secular living in secular society, it is um, it is rarely that we are surrounded by people who talk about God openly. So this relationship, this dialogue, this language about God, and this openness to ourselves that we are spiritual being in secular society feels like coming out, feels like coming out from bubble, feels like detaching yourself from dunya, from societal expectation. But where do you go next? So the next thing that you go is you go into your community, and now you are experiencing as a new Muslim. Again, I'm sorry, guys, to if you considering to embrace Islam right now and you're listening to us, maybe put fingers into your ears. Or maybe be prepared, I don't know. But unfortunately, we are going to experience alienation and loneliness in this Muslim community as well, because we are being seen as something other. We are being seen as something um, not serious, something that needs to be told how to, needs to be monitored, needs to be checked. Like I give you my very personal experience when I first got married and I knew my stuff. I was Muslim for quite some time, but when I got married to my husband, he doesn't know that, but I know that, and now you know that he was behind the door listening if I'm reciting correctly, and he never commented on that. Bless him. But I know of his sisters who had those comments, and that completely put them off and destabilized them at this level of, am I worthy of Islam? And is this journey of Islam is actually worth it? Because we sacrificing a lot. And we don't realize as a new Muslims, psychologically speaking, this is the reason what I'm going to say, this is the reason why it's happening, right? So we don't realizing that partially we are affected by it because of our own subconscious contract with ourselves. Let me explain you what I mean by that. I will start with an example and then I will tell you what the theory is about, okay? So when I first came to Islam, uh, I've started surrounding myself with Muslims, and I started seeking circles and occasions when they gather. And I went to the mosque. And being a Christian, born and bred culturally Christian, and being in the church before, involved in the church before as well, I was programmed to follow the authority follow the advice of a male, because that's what you do as a Christian. You follow a priest. I've never been exposed to the circle of nuns, so I never had actually experienced religious or spiritual guidance from a woman. And then in this mosque, a female, a Muslim woman, Polish woman like myself, convert woman. I didn't said Shahada, but it felt like, I'm going to do that. She shamed me. She shamed me, and I couldn't be more grateful for that shaming until today. She shamed me, and she's taken my subconscious, culturally modeled contract within myself. I had a contract. I didn't know. I had the contract about spirituality with myself. And what was the contract that she said to me? She said to me, she pointed out to me, look, if you want to follow a guy for spiritual and religious guidance, be my guest. But you have me and you have other sisters. Why don't you learn from us? Why don't you ask the same questions? We have the same answers. That was never a thing for me. So she shamed me in the circle, and I'm not saying that she done it right. I'm not saying that it was a good etiquette, but it made me stop. It made me stop, not stop Islam, but it made me stop. And I want all of you, when you experience shaming, religious shaming, stop in the same way that I've stopped myself. And it made me evaluate something I never knew that I was evaluating. Now I know because I read into it, and now you will know because I'm telling you that there is such a thing as a of authority, locus of authority. What is your locus of authority? Who do you decide get to tell you about what is spirituality? Who do you get to decide that is going to guide you in your religion? Who is your authority in those matters? It is your decision. And it might be that you are being conditioned like I was conditioned, but it might also be your stubbornness not to open yourself to different sources of knowledge. And those spiritual shamings, they freeze you. And very often we wake up, oh, so my husband is not my authority. He doesn't know. Oh, so my Iman, he hasn't got enough knowledge. He just made mistake. Oh, so this Quran is translated from the perspective that is not correct perspective. I have to go now and tap into different translation of Quran, do different tafsir. Oh, so my friend, she didn't know. She just spoken about her opinion. She didn't study Islam. She wasn't taught Islam. So you see, uh, locus of authority is something that we all hold, we all commit to more consciously or subconsciously. And this shock, I don't want to call it trauma because it's not trauma, it's just a shock. This test, of being religiously shamed should invite us into a journey within and question us at the level of what is my locus of evaluation? What am I doing here? Why have I came to Islam? Because if anything, subhanallah, I was so happy to find out way before my shahada that my relationship with Allah is my business, that I don't need anything and anyone in between. That was my ticket to Islam. How did I get myself to this point when I get other people influence that strong relationship and that strong faith that he exists and that that it matters? Does it make sense, Kelly?
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of the religious shaming comments that we might be receiving and getting could be an opportunity to look at it in a different standpoint of view and just ask ourselves, who are we? What are we trying to get out of this? Or what can we get out of this? Because now that I'm like reflecting on this a little bit, it sounds like, well, and when I actually reflect on my journey specifically and some of the shameful comments or feelings of disesteem and self-disgust that like comes up is coming from a place of where people are unintentionally causing harm, or some of them may be doing it because they're just so tired of seeing the same thing, right? Because that's also real, very real and happens. But they're coming from a point where they want to learn and teach and say something. It might not be like what you experience, the best etiquette, the best way of doing it, but it happens and it's said. So we can start looking from within. But going back to those comments, we're kind of recognizing that these religious shameful comments could be people communicating knowledge, right? Whether that's from a man or a woman. What are two examples of how you think how imposing unrealistic spiritual goals can sound like. How can that sound like?
Yeah, no problem. I mean, there's obviously a whole list of it, isn't it? But we can, as reverts, be criticized even publicly by wearing our traditional clothing, so jeans, especially when we talk about religious shaming coming from Desi culture, isn't it? They just have something against jeans, you know?
Mhm.
So that is very permanent. And then we can be criticized by uh, generally by not wearing their cultural clothes, like
Right.
why not wearing a baya, why are you wearing hijab the way you're wearing your hijab, why is it not full hijab? And we might be also told that our salah is not complete salah because we've done wudu not in the correct way, or we didn't sat long enough in between one movement to another movement. It happened to me, or that we're not wearing socks, or we should wear socks, and they are the wrong type of socks. So we are also we can also be religious shamed in indirect way, meaning we can be offended even, by religious shaming. We can experience this um, almost assumption about us. Just because you are revert, I'm sure you're going to go back to alcohol. I'm sure you're going to go back to gambling and dating. Like
Right.
I had older sister sitting in front of me, born Muslim, uh, asking me, oh, so how does the alcohol taste? That's very offensive. Or, when you
Yeah.
sit in the Z culture and they start, they don't think that you understand, but they start calling you goody. That's very offensive. That's also, that also has an impact on you. And that also creates that idea that you are different, you are worse than them, that you can't walk the talk, and you're not here to stay. Um, and and there's something about born Muslims, um, obviously not all of them, but something about undeveloped um, born Muslims that makes them create those assumptions about us, that makes them approach us in this way, almost like parent to child sort of dynamic. So it also shows you, if you have somebody coming strongly at you with criticism and makes you feel that you're never good enough, you can straight away ask yourself a question: why he's treating me like I'm his child? What is it about him that he wants to parent me? I don't need parenting. I've parented my way to Islam way before that person met me. What is it about his adab and akhlaq that makes him feel it's all right? And normally you will come to conclusions when you sit with it that there's probably some mental health or developmental issue there in that person. Therefore, it's not on you, it's on that person.
Right.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And when we talk about imposing unrealistic goals, it sounds like just kind of from that last point that you made about being parented, it's almost like giving a child unrealistic goals. Like they haven't even reached there yet. And I kind of experienced a bit, and I mentioned it on one of my TikToks actually, where I said sometimes people are, especially when it comes to the clothing, or, why aren't they hijabs or whatever it is. And there's a lot of pressure with hijab alone. Like that's just another topic for another day. But
It is definitely.
like people try their best to live within their means, or people are in general just trying to even attain a life where they can live within their means. And there's so many factors that come into like clothing and purchasing different clothes and changing our wardrobes, especially as like comers and reverts. So I really like how you gave us that example of like a parent and a child, and also just putting it out there like, I brought myself here, I took myself here, like trust in that process and trust in that choice. So I thank you for sharing that piece with
Thank
us.
you.
Is there one last thing that you would like to say to the listeners when it comes to religious shaming?
You know what? I want to say so much more, obviously, but the time doesn't allow. But other than religious shaming, we also experiencing spiritual abuse, religious abuse, and spiritual grooming in this community as well. And those experiences, this dom, this oppression within spiritual and religious communities is nothing new. It actually happens not only in our community, it happens in any other religious community. So what I
Mhm.
probably to leave you guys with is with normalization of it. It's not that it's fair, not that you deserve it, but in a sense of, building that resilience within you, be aware, be prepared that, it is going to come your way, and how to recognize it when probably, sit with yourself, sit with the situation, go into tafakkur, go into contemplation, and look for experiences of whether somebody tried to control you, you know uh, or maybe influence you in a controlling way. Did anyone, installed fear and guilt in you? That is clear manipulation. There's that concept in Islam, reward and punishment, and guilt and fear is something that is actually spiritual experience. It doesn't have to bring you down psychologically. Did anyone in your identity formation gave you any inclination that you are not good enough, that asked you also to deprive yourself, had imposed on you their vision of, we have even books like this, Ideal Muslima, Ideal Muslim, that is very harmful.
Yes, yes, definitely. Thanks for sharing that. That's a really good point to also recognize that this isn't just something that happens within Islam. Like, again, it's just real life that it happens in other forms and other religions as well in their group. So that's a good note taking because it's not an Islam thing. So for those
No,
of you who are
it's a
non-Muslim and
human thing.
maybe curious
It's a
and
human
listening
thing.
in, it's just a
Yeah,
human life thing. And, trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you the strength to get through it, and you're stronger than you think you are. Thank you,
absolutely.
listeners, for tuning in. If you need a friend or you want someone to talk to about this, lean into Ayishah. She's there for you. All the resources are going to be in the comments, so be sure to check that out on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And once again, thank you for tuning in. We'll catch you in the next one. Assalamu alaikum.